Ladies and gents, welcome back to another video. In front of me here should be an iPhone 5. This one I believe has never been updated, so it should still be on iOS 6, which is what it launched with when this thing came out in 2012. We've got one over here, although it is not quite stock iOS 6. I did the iOS 7 downgrade method. You can check out that video on my channel if you want to see that. This one should be a completely untouched iPhone 5 in the sense that it's never been updated at all, should still be on iOS 6. Let's get it opened up and see what we've got. All right, here it is. It is in the silver color. The condition appears to be decent. The display does not have any cracks, and the glass on the back does not have any cracks either, although the phone is pretty dirty. There's actually a piece of tape up there. We'll go ahead and take that off. And we actually have quite a few dents and scuff marks around the edges. The glass here is a little bit lifted up thanks to a significant dent on the metal frame. But apart from that, the phone appears to be in decent condition. I'll be shocked if it has any power, but we'll go ahead and try that power button. And it's completely dead. So I'm going to go ahead and get this plugged into power, and I'll clean it up just a little bit. And then we'll be back to talk about this iPhone, and hopefully it's got iOS 6. All right, the iPhone 5 has had a chance to sit on the charger, and check this out, it is running iOS 6. We're met with that old style setup screen. Apart from charging, I did my best to clean it up. The back is not in fantastic condition. As you can see, there's still some scuff marks on it, and the glass is actually pretty nice. There are a few scratches, but overall a pretty clean device. I think the biggest concern is potentially up here where the glass is lifting up off the display thanks to that dent there. I've also noticed that the power button does not work, so I can press that as much as I want. The phone does not light up. You have to use the home button. So let me go ahead and fly through the setup screen here, and it looks like the battery is still pretty low. Hopefully we have enough to make it through the video. If not, I'll have to break this up. Always a treat to see the Siri on the iOS 6 setup screen. Most iOS 6 devices do not support Siri. And here we go. We are on the home screen here for iOS 6, and it looks beautiful. Heading into settings, general, and about, you can see we're running 6.1.2, and this is a 16 gigabyte iPhone 5. So not the earliest version of iOS 6. In fact, it's actually one of the later. I believe 6.1.4 was the last version that the iPhone 5 supported, with some of the other devices going all the way up to 6.1.6 if iOS 6 was their final version of iOS. The iPhone 5 is a really cool device. When this thing came out in 2012, it revolutionized the iPhone and took it a step further towards what we know it as today. So many changes here with this device. Probably the biggest was the expansion of the screen. It was now a 4-inch display up from 3.5. We got the lightning connector down here. That was huge for Apple. And they made this phone thinner and lighter than the 4 and 4S that it replaced. That was a big feat considering that this phone is actually bigger, but they made it lighter. I think actually probably because of the aluminum rear instead of an entire glass back contributed to this phone being quite a bit lighter. Performance saw a massive upgrade here with the iPhone 5. This thing came with a dual-core A6 chip. I believe that was 1.3 gigahertz, and it was massively faster over the A5 that it replaced in both CPU and GPU performance. This thing was great at playing games, demanding applications, and multitasking thanks to 1 gigabyte of RAM. That was the most an iPhone had ever had at the time. And as we get our nostalgic view here of the iOS 6 app switcher, which unfortunately most of the applications on here do not load, but that doesn't mean we can't enjoy the app switcher down here. And remember, you had to hold them down and then close them one by one by clicking on those X's. So kind of a throwback there. Let's check out the iOS 6 wallpapers. This is something I'd used to do in a lot of my older videos, but have kind of strayed away from for whatever reason. This is a classic here. It's a beach somewhere, can't say for sure, but it looks really nice with the old style Apple icons. In fact, we're actually seeing some of this design from iOS 6 reappear in iOS 26, I think is what Apple's calling it, or iOS 25. I don't even know what it's called, but it's more of a glossy finish, similar here to iOS 6, which was the last version of iOS before Apple introduced iOS 7, which then completely overhauled the design and brought us to a more modern and more familiar looking design that we see here. This is iOS 10 on an iPhone 7, but you can see it looks quite a bit different, as I'm sure most of you guys know. The iPhone 5 came with Siri, as I almost drop it there. The iPhone 4S introduced Siri, and iPhone 5 made it faster, thanks to the quicker CPU and faster Wi-Fi and cellular data. The iPhone 5 does have LTE support. It was the first iPhone to feature 4G, which brought huge speed improvements, and 4G was utilized all the way up through the iPhone 11. So 4G was brought around for a long time, and then obviously the iPhone 12 brought 5G, and we haven't looked back since, but 4G started here on the iPhone 5. This thing only came in 2 colors, silver, as you can see here with the white front, and a slate black, which looks fantastic. It's got a very dark finish, much darker than space gray, almost a blue tint to it. I don't have one right here to show you guys, but it looks super cool. If you're picking up an iPhone 5, you really can't go wrong. Both of these colors look fantastic. So the iPhone 5 came with iOS 6, and that launched in 2012. This would get iOS 7, 8, 9, and 10. So 4 years of updates, and actually iOS 10 on the iPhone 5 is still a decent experience. Usually iPhones on their last version of iOS are pretty slow, or at least they used to be, but the iPhone 5 is kind of where that changed. iOS 10 runs pretty well on here, certainly not as good as any newer phones, but compared to, for example, the iPhone 4 or the 4S, running iOS 7 or iOS 9 respectively, this thing does a much better job at handling its last version of iOS. If it weren't for the 32-bit limitation here of the architecture, I do believe the iPhone 5 could have gotten iOS 11 and maybe even iOS 12, and I think it would have run them fine. But obviously this having a 32-bit CPU, that was the reason that this thing did not get any more software updates. The iPhone 5 shares a very similar camera lens to the 4S. It is 8 megapixels, and I cannot say for sure if it's able to record 1080p video, but we'll go ahead and check it out here. So I'll switch over to camera here. We will switch to video, and I'll go ahead and start a recording, and we'll switch over to that right now. All right, here we are on the iPhone 5, and unfortunately I did have to switch. So I'm not using the same one I showed you in the video. That's because I am like 2 hours in the future here, and that phone will not connect to the computer for whatever reason. So this is also an iPhone 5 running iOS 6, but it's not the exact one. So hopefully you guys can still get a feel for the video quality here and the audio quality. No optical image stabilization, so it's probably a bit shaky. Let me know down in the comments, how does this look and sound? Are you surprised that this is from a 2012 smartphone? Or does this look as bad as I think it's going to? All right, we'll go back to the main video here. All right, there you got to see and hear how the iPhone 5 records video. When it came out, it did a really nice job at video recording and taking pictures. One of the biggest improvements was low light, so I'm not sure what Apple did, but this thing was much better at capturing photos in low light conditions. We'll go ahead and snap a picture there of our other iPhone 5 running iOS 6. Like I said before, this one has been downgraded. Although they look very similar, this is not quite an authentic iOS 6 experience that we have here. This iPhone has never been updated, and as you could see from the initial setup screen, this thing is running stock iOS 6, iOS 6.1.2 to be exact, and it is a beautiful device here in this white finish. It came in 16, 32, and 64 gigabyte capacities, the same as the iPhone 4S that it replaced. The iPhone 5 was an awesome device. It was the first phone to feature that Lightning connector, and believe it or not, this was my first iPhone. I bought this new when it came out in 2012. I had a 32 gigabyte white iPhone 5, and I loved it. That thing was a beautiful iPhone, and I kept it until I upgraded to a 6 Plus a couple years later. Having one of these on iOS 6 is a real treat, and it just looks fantastic. You can't get enough of it. Such a beautiful device. All right, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, I look forward to seeing you in another one of my videos.